Dorian stepped onto the pristine grounds of Winston University with his scholarship in hand, thinking his biggest challenge would be keeping up with the rigorous academics. Little did he know, some students had already decided he didn't belong. They saw his skin color, his modest attire, and made their assumptions. What they didn't see was the fighter beneath the surface, the years of training in Chicago's toughest dojos, the discipline forged through hardship, the warrior who had mastered both intellect and combat. And they were about to learn that pushing him too far was a grave mistake. His first day should have been about settling into classes, but whispers trailed him through the halls. "Must be lost, community college is downtown," one student muttered. The voice belonged to Chad Thompson, a legacy student with a smirk that dripped privilege. Dorian ignored it, keeping his posture strong. He had learned early that silence could be more powerful than words. In his bag were medals from martial arts tournaments and acceptance letters from Ivy League schools. He had nothing to prove to anyone. But Chad wasn't done. In class, he made sure his voice carried when he said, "Affirmative action must be working overtime." Laughter followed, but it died down when the professor posed a complex physics question, and the only hand that went up was Dorian's. With ease, he explained the concept in a way that left even the professor impressed. Chad's smirk faltered. That was the first crack. Later, in the hallway, Chad and his friends blocked Dorian's path. "We've got a little tradition here," Chad said, his tone dripping with mockery. "New students prove they belong." Dorian felt his muscles tense, but he forced himself to stay calm. He could end this here, but his mother's words echoed in his head. "You're not there to fight, you're there to win at their game." Instead of reacting, Dorian pulled out his phone and hit record, documenting every word of their so-called tradition. Bullies thrived in the dark, exposing them was the best weapon. "Look, I'm just here to study," he said, voice steady. But Chad leaned in, his expression twisting. "Same as us. That's cute, but let's be real, you're not Winston material." That's when Jessica Chen, student newspaper editor, walked by, phone in hand, recording everything. She had been investigating discrimination at Winston, and she had just hit gold. Chad didn't even notice her. Bullies rarely saw beyond their immediate target. By afternoon, Dorian overheard Chad's crew plotting something bigger. The upcoming physics presentation. Apparently, they had plans for him. But Dorian was already 3 steps ahead. He had spent years not just learning how to fight but mastering strategy. And he was about to turn their own arrogance against them. The next morning, his locker was covered in printouts of scholarship requirements. Subtle. But tucked in the corner was something else. An old photo of Winston's class of 1963. Not a single person of color in sight. Before he could dwell on it, a girl named Sarah approached. "They did the same thing to my brother 2 years ago. He transferred out, couldn't take it." She handed him more documents, more proof of how Chad's fraternity, Beta Theta, had spent decades upholding an unspoken rule, keep outsiders out. But while Chad was busy playing his cruel games, Dorian was gathering evidence. And soon, the university would have to face the truth. At lunch, Dorian watched as Chad mocked another student, a freshman named Miguel. His fists clenched, instincts screaming at him to intervene. But instead, he pulled out his phone, documenting everything. Chad's bullying wasn't just personal, it was part of a larger, systematic effort. And there was something even bigger at play, a cheating ring. Rich students paid Chad's crew to take tests, write essays. Dorian had proof. Now, all he had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. "You should just leave," a voice muttered behind him. It was Brad, one of Chad's right-hand men. "You don't belong here." Dorian smiled, calm and confident. "I think I'll stick around. Things are about to get interesting." The real shift came in the campus gym. Dorian was mid-workout when Chad and his entourage swaggered in, trying to bulk up. Chad sneered, loud enough for the whole gym to hear. "Maybe then you'll actually fit in." A hush fell over the room. Everyone was watching. "How about a little competition?" Chad pointed to the boxing ring. "Winner gets respect. Loser, well, losers know where they belong." Chad had state boxing titles. His father had paid for the best trainers money could buy, but he didn't know who he was up against. "You sure?" Dorian asked, giving him one last chance to back down. Chad grinned, already peeling off his hoodie. His frat brothers crowded around the ring, eager for a show. But what Chad didn't notice was Miguel pulling out his phone. Sarah did too. Even some of Chad's own fraternity brothers were recording. Everyone loved seeing a bully get what was coming to them. The bell rang. Chad lunged, throwing a perfect right hook. But Dorian wasn't there anymore. Years of training took over. He moved like smoke, effortless. In an instant, Chad was on the mat, staring at the ceiling, gasping for breath. The video spread faster than wildfire. But Dorian didn't gloat. He knew better. Bullies were most dangerous when their power was threatened. The next day in physics, the professor announced project partners. Dorian and Chad, he said. Remember, this is 40% of your grade. Chad's glare could have frozen fire. After class, he cornered Dorian in the computer lab. Listen, scholarship, he hissed. I don't care how good you are at fighting. One phone call from my father to the dean and Dorian cut him off with a chuckle. You mean the same father who's going to have to explain how his son runs a cheating network? Or the one who's about to see his name plastered all over the school paper for hazing and discrimination? For the first time, Chad looked uncertain. Dorian leaned in. See, you made one big mistake. You thought I was playing checkers. But I've been playing chess this whole time, and I just called checkmate. Dorian continued typing, his fingers gliding effortlessly over the keyboard as he accessed more files. Interesting, he muttered, barely sparing Chad a glance. Because I have some calls to make too. While Chad had been busy trying to intimidate him, Dorian had been gathering evidence. Screenshots of the fraternity's cheating ring, emails about students paying for others to take their tests, and even a shared drive full of old exams, everything neatly compiled. You're not the only one who knows how to play the system, Dorian said, his voice calm. Difference is, I learned to survive. You learned to cheat. Chad made a critical mistake at that moment. His frustration boiling over, he lunged for Dorian's laptop. But security cameras had a way of capturing everything. Before Chad could even process what had happened, a quiet voice spoke up. I've got it all on camera, said Amy, the lab assistant, pointing to the ceiling. Every word. Chad's face turned several shades of pale. His privileged world had never prepared him for a moment like this, where his actions actually had consequences. But privilege had a way of making people feel invincible, and Chad wasn't ready to back down just yet. The next morning, Dorian walked into the cafeteria to the sound of snickering. Chad and his crew huddled around their phones, smirking. Dorian didn't even have to check his own phone to know what they'd done. Classic rich kid move, when in trouble, shift the blame. They'd created a fake social media account, posting doctored images to make it look like Dorian had cheated on his entrance exams. Dorian simply sat down across from Chad, meeting his gaze. The cafeteria had gone silent. Everyone was watching. Interesting timing, Dorian said casually, sliding his phone across the table. Especially since I just emailed Professor Martinez all the evidence of who's really been cheating. Chad's smirk faltered. Dorian tapped the screen, showing the sent email, which included a complete record of their group chat detailing the entire cheating operation. Chad swallowed hard. You're bluffing, he stammered, but the slight tremble in his hands gave him away. That's when Jessica from the student newspaper stood up, holding her recorder. He's not, she said, and I have interviews from 10 students you scammed. The real blow came from Miguel, the student Chad and his friends had bullied. He turned up the volume on his phone, playing a recording of Chad's crew bragging about their years of cheating. The cafeteria erupted into murmurs. Even some of Chad's own fraternity brothers started shifting uncomfortably, deleting messages off their phones. That afternoon, things reached a breaking point in the campus parking lot. Chad was waiting for Dorian, alone this time. No backup, no fake confidence. Just a desperate kid whose world was crashing down. You think you've won? Chad growled, his designer shoes scuffing against the pavement. My father will what? Dorian cut him off. Write another check. Make some calls. That might have worked before, but things are different now. Dorian turned his phone screen toward Chad. The hashtag Winston Cheaters was trending. News outlets were picking up the story. The entire university was watching. Panic flashed across Chad's face. In a last-ditch effort, he threw a punch. But unlike in the gym, this wasn't controlled. It was sloppy, predictable. Dorian simply stepped aside, letting Chad stumble forward, right into a puddle. Sometimes karma didn't need any help at all. The real victory wasn't in the big moments. It wasn't in the fights or the exposures. It was in the quiet, everyday changes. Like how the next scholarship student who walked through Winston's gates wouldn't have to look over their shoulder. Or how Miguel now confidently raised his hand in class, his voice clear and steady. A month later, Dorian was sitting in the library when a freshman approached him. Is it true, she asked nervously, what they say about how you changed things? Dorian looked around. At students studying together. At Chad, actually helping someone with homework. At Sarah, organizing a diversity panel with the dean's support. I didn't change anything, he said. We all did. Sometimes, people just need to see that it's possible. He glanced at his phone, at a new text from his mom. Proud of you, baby. You fought smart, not hard. Because that's what this story was really about. Not just karma, not just justice, but about knowing how to fight your battles. Because the truth is, you don't need special powers or expert fighting skills to stand up to bullies. Sometimes, all it takes is the courage to take that first step, the wisdom to gather your evidence, and the patience to let karma do its thing.